Welcome to episode 5 of the Card Notes by Vintage Hockey Cards Report podcast. Today we're taking a closer look at the Brad Park 1979-80 o-pee-chee number 23 card, the Phil Esposito 1966-67 Topps number 63 card, the Phil Myre 1973-74 o-pee-chee number 77 card, the Gilbert 1966-67 Topps number 26 card, and the Paiement 1976-77 o-pee-chee number 37 card. Let's get on with it. Enjoy. The Gilbert 1966-67 Topps number 26 hockey card. Written on the back of the card, Rod has been plagued with back trouble ever since he entered the NHL, playing most of his games in a special steel-braced corset. This year, after a successful operation, Rod is off to his best start, scoring 3 goals in the Rangers' opening game. A closer look. Error. Gilbert had a hat trick for the New York Rangers early in the 1966-67 NHL season. However, it was not in the team's opening game. In the first game of the season, the Rangers fell 6-3 to the visiting Chicago Blackhawks in a game played at Madison Square Garden. The only time Gilbert got his name on the score sheet was when he assisted on a second-period goal by Don Marshall. The 3-goal game came in New York's second game of the season, a road game against the Toronto Maple Leafs at Maple Leaf Gardens. Gilbert scored 1 in the first and 2 in the second, all assisted by Phil Goyette. Rod also assisted on the final goal of the game, scored by Wayne Hillman for a 4-point night. Goyette would come out with 4 points as well, all assists. The game ended up in a 4-4 tie. After playing just 35 games in 1965-66, Gilbert had an excellent 1966-67 season, having his best season to that point with 28 goals in 64 games, leading the team in that category. Rod would score a career-high 43 goals in 1971-72. Gilbert played 1,065 regular season and 79 Stanley Cup playoff games in the National Hockey League between 1960-61 and 1977-78. His entire NHL career was spent with the Rangers. Gilbert was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1982. The Phil Myre 1973-74 o-pee-chee number 77 hockey card. Written on the back of the card, Phil came up through the Montreal system, but Ken Dryden and Rogatien Vachon were with the Canadiens, and Phil was overshadowed. He had an outstanding junior career that included All-Star and MVP honors in his final season with Niagara Falls. A closer look. Phil Myre played 49 games with the Montreal Canadiens over 3 seasons, 1969-70 to 1971-72. However, it was Dryden's performance in the 1970-71 Stanley Cup playoffs that put Myre on the outside looking in. As for Vachon, he was actually out the door before Myre traded to the Los Angeles Kings. The Atlanta Flames took Phil as their first pick at the 1972 NHL expansion draft. He stayed with the club, sharing duties with Dan Bouchard until a 1977-78 trade sent him to the St. Louis Blues. Myre starred in the OHA Junior A, now the OHL, with the Niagara Falls Flyers. In 67-68, he was named second-team All-Star goalie. Phil led the Flyers to a J. Ross Robertson Cup championship and eventually a Memorial Cup championship win over the Estevan Bruins in the final. Phil Myre appeared in 439 regular season games in the National Hockey League between 1969-70 and 1982-83 with the Habs, Flames, Blues, Philadelphia Flyers, Colorado Rockies, and Buffalo Sabres. However, he never regained the playoff magic he had with Niagara Falls, appearing in just 9 games in the postseason. He was on the roster for Montreal's 1971 Stanley Cup win. The Paiement 1976-77 o-pee-chee number 37 hockey card. Written on the back of the card, Kansas City's first-round draft choice in 1974, Wilf is one of the rising young stars of the NHL. He's an extra hard worker with a real fine scoring touch. A closer look. Wilf Paiement was selected 2nd overall by the Kansas City Scouts at the 1974 NHL Amateur Draft. Going first was Greg Jolly, taken by the Washington Capitals. Paiement would play nearly 3 times as many games in the NHL as Jolly. Wilf totaled 814 career points, while Jolly recorded just 97. Paiement was drafted out of the St. Catharines Blackhawks in the OHA Junior A. In 1973-74, he scored 50 goals and assisted on 73 for 123 points with the Blackhawks. Surprisingly, these numbers placed him just 3rd on the team behind Rick Aduono and Dave Gorman. St. Catharines swept past the Oshawa Generals, Toronto Marlboros, and Peterborough Petes to capture the J. Ross Robertson Cup. 1976-77 was a breakout year for Paiement. He scored 41 goals and assisted on 40 for 81 points, nearly doubling his output from the year before. It would prove to be a career year for goals, but he would record 97 points with the Toronto Maple Leafs in 1980-81. Wilf Paiement played 946 regular season and 69 playoff games in the National Hockey League between 1974-75 and 1987-88. He appeared with the Kansas City Scouts, Colorado Rockies, Toronto Maple Leafs, Quebec Nordiques, New York Rangers, Buffalo Sabres, and Pittsburgh Penguins. The Phil Esposito 1966-67 Topps number 63 hockey card. Written on the back of the card, Phil has averaged 25 goals per season for his first 2 full years in the NHL. When you compare his record to Bobby Hull, who scored only 31 goals in his first 2 seasons, you can readily see the value in this big left winger. A closer look. True, it's undeniable that Phil Esposito had a great start to his NHL career, and simply kept that momentum going until he retired, but I don't think it's fair to compare his stats to those of Bobby Hull. In the Golden Jets' first year, the Blackhawks were dreadful, finishing just 2 points ahead of the Toronto Maple Leafs for last place in the 1957-58 NHL season. Hull did only score 13 goals, but his 47 points were good for second on the team behind Ed Litzenberger. Not bad for a rookie. That number improved to 18 in 1958-59 as the team improved and the pieces started to fall in place for what would be a Stanley Cup championship team in just a few short years. It should also be noted that Bobby Hull jumped right out of junior to play all 70 games for Chicago in 1957-58. Esposito was in his 3rd season of pro hockey by the time he was a rookie in 1964-65. He was a standout in the e-pee-chee and c-pee-chee before getting a 27-game trial with the Blackhawks in 1963-64. When Phil did become a full-time Blackhawk, the team was well established, making it much easier to score against other teams' second and third lines. Of course, 1966-67 would be Esposito's last year in Chicago. The trade of the decade would take place in the offseason, sending Phil, Ken Hodge, and Fred Stanfield to the Boston Bruins. Going to Chicago were Gilles Marat, Pitt Martin, and Jack Norris. The Brad Park 1979-80 o-pee-chee number 23 hockey card. Written on the back of the card, Brad set playoff record 9 goals as a defenseman in 1977-78. Brad set mark with 27th career playoff goal in 1979. A closer look. That single playoff season mark of 9 goals put up by Brad Park in 1977-78 still stands today tied for 4th most all time. He is tied with Bobby Orr, who scored 9 with the Boston Bruins in 1969-70. Orr accomplished the feat playing 1 less game than Park. The current record for most goals by a defenseman in a single playoff season belongs to Paul Coffey. Paul put up 12 goals for the Edmonton Oilers in 1984-85. When all was said and done, Brad Park totaled 35 playoff goals over his career. That mark today places him 7th on the all-time list. Leading the way again is Paul Coffey with 59. Coming in second is Denny Potvin with 56. Despite these great playoff numbers, Park never played for a Stanley Cup champion. He appeared in 1,113 regular season and 161 playoff games in the NHL between 1968-69 and 1984-85 with the New York Rangers, Boston Bruins, and Detroit Red Wings. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Card Notes. Stay tuned, there'll be more coming up soon. If you could, please hit the like button, and we'd really appreciate if you'd subscribe to the channel.